The night was cold, and the rain fell in heavy sheets, blanketing the streets of Blackwater in a misty haze. The city was restless, its pulse erratic, like it knew something was off. I felt it too, that twinge in my gut that always told me I was onto something, even if I didn't quite know what it was yet. By my side, Max trotted silently, his wet fur glistening under the flickering streetlights. Max wasn't just any dog. He was my partner, a Belgian Malinois with a nose like a bloodhound and instincts sharper than most detectives I'd worked with. Together, we'd cracked cases that seemed impossible, but this one was different. 2 days earlier, a prominent local journalist named Erin Mallory had been found murdered in her apartment. The crime scene was brutal, chaotic, and personal. Her throat had been slashed, and the walls were smeared with words written in her own blood. No one escapes the truth. It was the kind of scene that sticks with you, haunts you when you try to sleep. The press was calling it the work of a psychopath. I just called it unfinished business. We had a suspect, Logan Voss, a reclusive tech genius turned conspiracy theorist. Voss had a history of threatening Mallory over her exposés on his illegal dealings. But when we'd shown up at his apartment, he was gone, leaving behind a trashed workspace and a trail that had gone cold faster than the coffee in my hand. Until tonight. The tip had come in an hour ago, a sighting of Voss near the old industrial district. Max and I were the closest unit, so we'd taken it. Now, as we moved through the abandoned warehouses, every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the rusted beams a threat. I kept my flashlight low, my other hand resting on the grip of my Glock. Max stayed a step ahead, his nose to the ground, his ears twitching at every sound. "Easy, boy," I murmured, as much to calm him as to steady myself. We reached the edge of a building with shattered windows and a faded sign that read Blackwater Foundry. Max froze, his body rigid, his nose pointing toward a half-open door. My pulse quickened. He'd caught a scent. I signaled him to stay close and pushed the door open with the barrel of my gun. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the cavernous space inside. The air was thick with the smell of rust and mildew. Piles of scrap metal and machinery cast long, jagged shadows across the floor. "Logan Voss," I called out, my voice firm but measured. "This is Detective Thorne. Come out with your hands up." Nothing. Just the drip of water from a leaky pipe somewhere in the distance. Max growled low in his throat, his body tense. He moved toward a stack of crates, his nose working overtime. I followed, my grip tightening on the Glock. As we rounded the crates, I caught a glimpse of movement, a flash of a figure darting toward a side exit. "Stop! Police!" I shouted, taking off after him. Max bolted ahead, his paws a blur on the wet concrete. The chase spilled out into the alley behind the foundry. Voss was fast, but Max was faster. He closed the distance in seconds, leaping and knocking Voss to the ground with a ferocious snarl. I was on them a moment later, my gun trained on Voss as he struggled beneath Max's weight. "Get him off! Get him off!" Voss screamed, his voice high-pitched and panicked. "Not until you stop squirming," I snapped, pulling out my cuffs. Max kept his teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from his chest. "Logan Voss, you're under arrest for the murder of Erin Mallory." "I didn't kill her," he yelled, his eyes wide and wild. "I swear I didn't do it." "Funny thing to say while running from the cops," I replied, slapping the cuffs on him. Max stepped back, but his eyes stayed locked on Voss, ready to pounce again if needed. Voss's chest heaved as he caught his breath. Then he looked up at me, something like fear, or was it desperation, flickering in his eyes. "You don't get it. They're coming for me too. Erin was just the first." The words hung in the air, heavier than the rain still falling around us. My gut twisted. There was something in his tone, something that told me this case wasn't as open and shut as it seemed. "Who's coming?" I demanded, but Voss just shook his head, his lips pressed into a thin line. Whatever he knew, he wasn't ready to say. "Not yet." I hauled him to his feet and led him to the squad car waiting at the end of the alley. Max trotted beside me, his tail wagging slightly, as if he knew the night was far from over. As I shut the car door on Voss, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only just scratched the surface of something much darker. And in Blackwater, The darkness always ran deep. Back at the station, Voss refused to talk. He sat in the interrogation room, his eyes darting to every corner as if expecting someone, or something, to burst in at any moment. His paranoia was palpable, but there was something else there too, genuine fear. I leaned against the two-way mirror, watching him while nursing a cup of stale coffee. Max lay at my feet, his head resting on his paws, his ears occasionally flicking at the muffled sounds from the room. My partner, Detective Quinn, joined me, a file in hand and a skeptical look on her face. "Voss is a mess," she said, tossing the file onto the counter. "But here's the kicker, his alibi might hold. Security footage from his apartment building shows him leaving 2 hours before Mallory was killed. He didn't come back until the next morning." I frowned, setting the coffee down. If he didn't do it, why run? Why hide out in the industrial district like a rat in a maze? "Good question," Quinn replied. "And then there's this." She flipped open the file, revealing photos of Mallory's crime scene. The words on the wall? The handwriting doesn't match Voss's. We're running it through the system, but so far, no hits. I stared at the photos, my mind racing. The message, "No one escapes the truth," felt less like a killer's taunt and more like a warning. Voss's cryptic claim that "they're coming for me too" echoed in my head. Who was they? "Let's see if he's ready to start talking," I said, pushing off the wall. Max rose to his feet, sensing it was time to move. Quinn gave me a nod, staying behind to monitor from the other side of the glass. Inside the interrogation room, I took a seat across from Voss. His hands were cuffed, his fingers twitching nervously on the table. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a glimmer of relief, like he was glad I was there. "You're scared," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "I get it. But if you want my help, you need to start talking. Who's after you?" Voss hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "You think this is just about Erin?" he whispered. "It's bigger than that." She was digging into something she shouldn't have. "Exposing people who don't want to be exposed. People like you?" I asked, leaning forward. "No," he snapped. "Not like me. Powerful people. Untouchable people." She found something that scared her enough to call me. His voice broke and he looked down at his hands. "She said she needed my help. That's why I went to see her that night." "You expect me to believe you went to help her?" I asked, my skepticism clear. "I didn't kill her," Voss said, his voice trembling. "When I got there, the door was already open. She was already dead. And there was someone else there. A man, tall, wearing a black coat. He saw me and I ran. I didn't know what else to do. I studied him, searching for any sign he was lying. But his fear felt real, his words too frantic to be rehearsed. "Did you recognize him?" I pressed. Voss shook his head. "Oh, but Erin mentioned a name before. Brian." She said it like it was a code or a person, I don't know. "But whoever they are, they're dangerous. They killed her, and now they're coming for me." The name sent a chill down my spine. Brian. It wasn't much, but it was something. I leaned back in my chair, the gears in my mind turning. If Voss was telling the truth, this wasn't about a personal vendetta. It was about something much bigger, something Erin had uncovered. And if Orion was behind it, we were dealing with a shadow far darker than I'd anticipated. I stood, motioning to the officer outside to take Voss back to holding. "We're not done," I told him. "If you remember anything else, you tell me." As the door closed behind him, I turned to Max, who was watching me intently. "Looks like we've got a new lead boy," I said, scratching behind his ears. "Time to find out what Erin Mallory was chasing and why it got her killed." But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were diving headfirst into something we weren't ready for. Because in Blackwater, the truth wasn't just elusive, it was deadly.